folks, welcome to an episode of The Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy, folks.
And that's right, folks, we are doing an episode on Jordan Peele's directed and written movie that came out in 2017. It was a bomb. It was awesome.
It really was.
Get Out is what it's called, starring Daniel Kaluuya and I didn't pronounce that right. Kaluuya? Shoot, I should have looked this up.
Kaluuya.
I'm a rookie.
I don't know either. I'm
I'm sorry, Mr. Daniel.
It's okay.
And Allison Williams as well as also a part of it, as well as other actors as well. But Mac, this was your selection. Yes, we're already getting started, getting this shindig on the road. Mac, why did you select this movie in particular? Because to frame this, right? I remember when this movie came out, and both you and we had watched it before, and we were really, really impressed by it. And so now this is certainly not the first time we're watching this film.
Nope.
What made you want to review it this time? What about it too also that makes it different now as opposed to back then?
Oh,
something to consider. Maybe we could put that. We'll put that away.
There. Yeah, we'll get there.
Put that in a wallet. We'll pull that out some other time.
Sure. So I decided to go for this movie because recently there've been a couple trailers coming out for Jordan Peele's next big film, Nope. Which I am extremely excited for, starring Keke Palmer, and I think that's going to be a really good time based off the trailers alone. There are several things that it's one of those movies where just by seeing the trailer, I know we're going to be reviewing it, because it is so stark and just drastic and haunting. Just the trailer is. It's one of those where there's so many images that I cannot get out of my mind. I can't stop thinking about it. And so because of that, I was kind of reminded of my feelings towards Jordan Peele and how much I love his past work.
As a comedian?
As a comedian and Key and Peele, but also with Get Out and Us, both the movies that he directed and I believe wrote, but I'm not going to claim that. I'm just going to say directed for now. You can find that one for me.
Yes, he wrote and written? Whatever, directed Us as well as Get Out. Yeah.
Okay.
You're safe.
Oh, thank God. So, I was reminded how good Get Out was, and it just felt like something that I'm kind of shocked we haven't talked about before. And I think based off of this season so far being not totally, but somewhat a trip down memory lane of what are some of the best things I've ever seen that I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
I feel like we've kind of been on that theme a lot this season so far.
Here and there.
Definitely with me starting us out with Parasite, not at the very beginning, but Cowboy Bebop as well. Just things that we look back on and we go, oh yeah, there's a lot of fun memories there.
This was a part of our life at one point,
exactly.
in a significant artistic way that influenced either how we viewed art and or how we consumed it and or how we make it.
Right, definitely. Yes, the last half of what you said especially there, and I think that kind of segues into why I chose it and what type of experience I had with Get Out, which is Get Out changed the way that I saw art.
Okay.
It changed the way that I saw media. I know, and storytelling especially.
Okay, but what about it then changed your perspective on those matters?
I was a much different person before I saw Get Out.
Okay.
It's a good start. I know. In that
hold on. I realized, just in case.
Oh, please.
By the way, that I don't properly frame the podcast enough in terms of, first of all, this is an art review show, of course. Obviously, I'm sure you were able to figure out at this point. And Get Out is about this black man who is dating this white woman, and they go and visit the white woman's family house in the middle of freaking nowhere in the wilderness. And there's a big old party, and then essentially what kind of comes down is he's being abducted, and they're going to essentially take over his brain and implant a white man's brain inside of his brain, and essentially become a white person, which is what is experienced throughout this movie. And then it's like a horror thriller, some comedic moments as well. So sorry, I had to stop you right there because I realized I don't frame this enough that I think it's important to just to put it out there.
And it is a very wild concept, the movie is. And just concept by itself, I know it's a little on the nose for some people, and but I was just so mesmerized by how interesting the concept was that I wasn't really my gut instinct whenever I was watching the first time, because when did you say it came out? 2017.
2017.
2017. So yeah, I guess that would make me a sophomore in college, for freshman.
I think it was
sophomore.
Freshman, sophomore year
like
of
early
our
freshman.
college careers.
Yeah.
But what about it then? I do have to ask. What about it then? Like made
Changed.
you change
Sure.
as an artist, as an individual?
So I never saw art as something that could, in one foul swoop, convince somebody of something.
Okay.
I always saw it as an emotional experience, something that was more cathartic, something that was, escapism, things like that. That's what I viewed art to be. And then whenever I watched this movie, I was fully convinced, not necessarily that I completely disagree with something, but it just sparked something in me, and I immediately felt like I was completely blind to something, and that all of a sudden I could see it everywhere now. And it was, I was not incredibly politically motivated or really involved at all for really any of my life.
Sure.
Prior to this movie. And I wouldn't say that I'm incredibly politically involved now. It's just that I was definitely not aware, and I challenged myself to be more aware after this movie.
Yeah, your ears and your eyes have turned up.
Right.
Essentially.
And it is purely because it really has to do with one moment in the movie.
Okay.
Because the concept is wild and whatnot, but I never really thought too hard about the racial commentary of the movie. The moment at the very end, whenever the main character, he is escaping the white family, and he is running away from them and everything, and he
what does he do?
Has a gun. He has a gun, and he is about to shoot this white girl who was a part of the family that just abducted him, and the cop car rolls up. And they kind of turn on the lights or whatever, right? And they intentionally don't show you who's driving the cop car.
Yeah.
Just the cop car rolls up, and you see the image of Daniel Kaluuya.
Yeah. Who plays Chris?
Chris.
Movie, yeah.
Over Allison
and
Williams.
And he didn't pick up the gun. He was trying to choke her out.
You're right. You're right. And
God, did you see the movie?
Chill with
Ridiculous.
that. And sorry, she had the gun. Right?
Oh my God, move on. Okay, so the cop car rolls up.
Cop car rolls up, and in that moment in the theaters, I remember thinking to myself, oh shit, that's the end of the movie.
That's the end of him.
He just got caught. Yeah. And he's gonna be framed, and that's it. And then his friend gets out of the car, and it's happy and everything. But just because in that moment I was like, why did I think that was what was going to happen? That's a huge fucking problem. That's what I thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I knew. I could put those pieces together in my mind, and I know that that's a problem, but I wasn't willing to accept that it was a problem. Yeah. And in that moment, because of this piece, I instantly accepted that problem and understood yes, that is a problem that I need to be much more aware of now. And that kind of sent me into this curiosity, this path that that made me a much more aware bystander, or a much more aware citizen.
And what's not pleasant, but I mean, what's really great about this film then, in that specific experience of that last scene, was that originally in the script, and also it was filmed and done, was that there was an alternate ending, was essentially that Chris was taken to jail. It was actually cops in that car, because he does call 911 at one point that that he's at the Armitage house, right? So, somebody comes to check it out, and they see this situation where there's a dead body right there. There's a white woman who is dying currently, who has a bullet wound right there. And then you have this man who is right over her and looks like is attempting to kill her. Yeah. And so I think it's actually what's really, really cool is that you had that experience of, oh shit, that this is gonna happen. Oh no, and addressing and realizing how bleeped up that is. And I think that's the case for most audiences too, but I think it goes to show how much potent it is that the movie tricks you into thinking that's what's going to happen, and instead it gives you the relief of, okay, it was actually his friend that's picking him up.
Right.
So like as an audience member, you receive that relief, right? You get that sense of like like that exhalation where it's just like things will be okay.
Right.
But you're still left with the experience of, oh wow, but that could have been so much worse.
And
purely because of how that scene was built up, that you just see that it's a cop car. You don't see that it's actually like a TSA, like a cop car from the airport.
Right.
You know,
there were two things specifically, or quite a few things, but mainly two things that really kind of flipped a switch in my brain whenever I first saw it, in terms of how they did it, how they got away with this kind of like audience trickery that they did, right? And how it was so effective, and what made me feel like, oh my god, I have been seeing art the wrong way this entire time, especially like theater, drama, and film, is that the biggest one being misdirection, is that a concept TV. We were talking about concept TV recently on the show.
Yeah.
That concept TV or concept films often burn out really fast.
Yeah.
They have really good beginnings, awful endings, because they sell the concept, they don't sell the finale.
Yeah. Lamb, which is something that we reviewed this year, is a very good example of like conceptually very interesting, and in terms of execution, it is much lesser than the idea of it.
Absolutely. I mean, we could point out a bunch of stuff we reviewed recently, but I think we were talking about it in the Cowboy Bebop
somewhere in there.
They're like the
the Netflix adaptation.
And yes, so I think what's so interesting about this is that it is kind of a concept piece. I think it is for sure a concept piece. But what's so interesting about it is that the concept is not used as like shoveling down your throat the message. The concept is also not used as like the thing that's supposed to hold your attention. It's just meant as a thing to get your attention at the beginning, and then it's used as misdirection. It's used to make you think that you know what's going to happen, and then they pull a fast one.
It's another thing too, where in the case of this movie, I believe that like the concept for it is not the most interesting thing. And when we say concept in this case, it's concept of the fact of like there's this neurosurgeon, which is the girlfriend's dad, and he's able to transplant a white brain into a black body and take over that body, essentially being being a host of that body, right? And so, like, that's, like, the concept of it. But what is the most interesting thing about this movie is it's not even that at all.
Yeah.
Right? It's the fact of, I believe, this black man's experience sort of surrounding that, right? And I think what's really, really powerful about this movie for the most part is that we are solely seeing it from Chris's perspective.
Right.
And we are typically behind the back of Chris throughout most of the film. And so we are realizing things and experiencing things with him. And so the biggest thing is when the party is held at the Armitage household, and then you have all of these individuals asking him about his race, about his physical capabilities, about what sports he plays, about the, the privileges, quote unquote, that he has received, with his body and with his life, that we're experiencing all those from Chris's perspective, that we were able to like get that a lot more, right? Which is a really well done sort of painting of the experience of the character.
Also, it is indirectly talking, or I guess directly, I'm not really sure, talking about something that is not often talked about, which is the glorification of African Americans and Black people in America. And that
it's something that's like often swept under the rug,
right?
For decades and decades and decades,
and that it's not necessarily like okay, post-slavery conversations. It's more a matter of like, okay, how are they being viewed now, and seeing it as like almost like I mean, in the movie they paint it as like a token or a prize to be won, or like perks or advantages like you were talking about, rather than people.
My friend, this happens every day, all the time, everywhere, right? It's still happening.
But the way
today.
They talk about it is the most effective I've seen.
Right, and then once you just kind of like put two and two together, right? And there are still some real world examples that are still happening. I think a really good one that happened more relatively recently was the former owner of the basketball team, the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yep, I was about to say.
Donald Sterling.
Yep.
And he was racist. He was just racist, but he was like one of those people.
And everyone knew it too.
Yes, and it was publicly known by other owners as well.
And he owned a basketball team of predominantly black people, correct?
Yes, and so it was the perfect example of like probably somebody who would say, I'm not racist.
Yeah.
But then when he would tell his girlfriend, hey, I don't like when you hang out with those people, you know? And it's exactly that, but it's somebody who is, profiting off of black individuals, African-American individuals, predominantly so, and who are impeccable in terms of their athletic capabilities.
Yeah.
And that is a lot of characters throughout this
Get
film.
Out.
It's, like, would Donald Sterling, I'm being reckless here, would Donald Sterling, like,
be one of the
be transplanted into a black body? I'm not going to accuse somebody of that, and I'm not going to accuse Donald Sterling like could be there. But like,
if there was a celebrity in real life that would, I wouldn't be shocked if it was him.
Point being, like, the characters in this movie, I would say, are only a few degrees away from people that are akin to Donald Sterling.
Sure.
And so, like, that's a thing. That is a real thing, no matter how much you deny it. And, like, one of the things that Jordan Peele, what made him want to start writing this movie was the fact of this idea throughout America where there was this post-racial society because Obama was elected that like, oh, we have fixed racism, right? We have solved everything, which is a very infantile and kindergarten way to look at it, right? Growing up, I think it's safe to say to you that, you know, when we were in elementary school, we thought racism was done. There was no such thing as racism anymore. We're done with it. We're finished. And then eventually, like, you get a little bit more of it in middle school and then in high school, and then you're like, oh shit, no, this is still really a thing.
Yeah.
But it was the idea of like, oh, we have this black man as president, everything is solved now. Yeah. We have done in America. We can pat ourselves on the back.
Another way of putting it, I think, is because I remember thinking this several times in elementary school was like, I can't be racist because I don't hate anyone for their race. And it's like, okay, well, sometimes racism isn't necessarily hate. Like, just, like racism is a very complicated
It could just be
word.
like some sort of like prejudice, even if it's like the smallest kind, you know?
Right.
Just so, because you may assume that like a black man that you walk by is a better basketball player than you. That even though you're looking at them in like a higher light in comparison to you, you are still doing an evaluation mostly purely based on race.
And I think the movie is so interesting because it really comes down in my mind to like two big questions and a big distinction that I think needs to be made and is really smart again on Jordan Peele's part, which is are these white people racist?
Yes.
100%. Do these white people hate black people?
Hate? I wouldn't say hate.
That's what I'm saying, and then that's why it gets so interesting. Is like it really shows, I think, in a very grandiose and insane and hilarious way, and sometimes horrifying way, a very, very difficult and complex relationship.
And it's also worth saying that us not being black, being like, oh, that's right, like but like occasionally we'll get those reminders of like, that's right, like people are capable of that, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to black individuals who are like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, right.
You know, that is so much more of their everyday, where it's not just the blatant like, bleep you, whatever. It's that sort of like a sentence or two that's just a little bit off.
Yeah. There were, so for Get Out and for Us, I saw both in the theaters. And I remember for both viewings, I was one of the very, very few white people in the audience.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that distinctly because that changed the experience drastically in the theaters.
Okay.
Which is neither, even though they're both labeled as horror movies and that's how they're sold, and most of the times whenever I watch them by myself or I've seen them after the fact, they've been relatively horror movies. Whenever I watched them in theaters, they were 100% not horror movies whatsoever.
They're not horror movies for the most part in the traditional sense.
Sure.
But this is, I think, a horror movie mostly because this is a black man's nightmare.
Right. But because I was watching it with a predominantly black crowd, there was the funnier moments were way funnier. And everyone in the theater was laughing really, really hard. And it was a lot less and a lot more consistently laughing at those moments. Yeah. And whenever something would happen that was supposed to be scary, jump scares or like a thriller type moment, it was like you were interested and you were watching. And it was interesting dramatically.
Oh, for sure.
But it wasn't like I'm so scared. It was like yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
And that I think changed a lot. So, but real quick, getting back to, I was talking about there's two big things that the movie did that I learned from. One was the misdirection. The second one that I think might be one of the most important things I've ever learned from watching a movie is if you're actually trying to effectively communicate something to an audience, you cannot tell them what to think.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're telling them what to think, they're not going to listen.
Okay.
Flat out.
Okay. So do you have an example?
You have to get them to connect the pieces on their own.
Yeah.
For instance, just like you were talking about, the alternate ending. If they would have shown us him getting taken away in that cop car and him going to jail, that would have been them spoon feeding us this message, and it probably would not have been as effective. Because the people that would have agreed would have said, yep, and the people that would have disagreed would have just been like, you're just trying to get me again. You're just trying to trick me into what, you know what I mean?
But it's having the audience realize
having them have to do the mental
themselves.
math on their own. That is just so clever, and I wish, and I don't think that's just like a thriller thing. I don't think that's just a horror thing. I don't think that's just a Jordan Peele thing. I think that every single piece should be thinking like that. Should be thinking like, how do I get them to come to me rather than me trying to shove it in their face?
And it's a tricky thing, and it's so much easier said than done, right? Where it's the common tale as old as time, show, don't tell. And how do you communicate information to your audience effectively where you're not beating them over the head with what you're trying to say or with what you're trying to do, or even with what you're trying to hide, or what you're trying to tease.
Well, and really the only way that you can effectively and consistently do that is by testing with audiences. You know what I mean? Private viewings and surveys and things like that. Because it's, whenever you're making it in the moment,
it's so hard.
It's impossible to have the awareness to step back and be like, how would a first timer really view this?
Yeah, because everything too deep down and stuff. It's so hard to tell. Even as an actor,
as an actor, director, and anybody, no matter who you are, working on a project. If I was working on Get Out, I would not know when I was spoon feeding and when I was not, because I'm just trying to tell the story as effectively as possible.
Yeah.
But that's why, like you were talking about, they make some several versions and have tests with audiences and stuff, because there's no other way to do it.
I'm curious. So when I was watching this, I watched this yesterday, and in regards to when we're recording right now, I watched this last night, and you see, there was a scene that I hadn't seen before. And it was the very first scene in the movie, and I don't recall it ever seeing it. And I don't believe it was part of the theatrical release at all. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've been trying to do research, and I need some backup on this. But it's an opening scene where they have Lakeith Stanfield as the actor, and he appears later on in the movie, and he is abducted.
Yeah.
In this first scene. Was that part of the theatrical release?
Yes.
Why don't I remember that scene?
It's because there was no context yet. It's because whenever you watch it, because I remember seeing that the second time. I completely agree. Because is this your second time watching it?
This was my second time ever watching this, yes. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I remember a lot about this movie. It's one of those movies that actually stays with you in 100%. Terms of the imagery as well as the storytelling. Yep. And you cannot say that for every movie.
True. And I think that's a Jordan Peele staple, is he works so hard on images and pictures. It's unbelievable. I just can never forget the things that he shows me. But yes, no, that was 100% in the original. I remember seeing it. I remember seeing it in theaters the first time, and I didn't even register. The beginning, I was just like, huh. I think I'm supposed to be scared. And then I moved on and I forgot about it.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I watched it, I thought the first scene in the movie was Allison Williams being in his apartment.
In the apartment, yeah.
Right.
That's what I thought was the first scene as well.
Right.
So I'm watching this
the
and I'm
second
like,
time
did
I watched
this?
it, though, I was like, oh, and that's the, okay. But it's purely because of context that you forget it, I promise.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious on your thoughts of that first scene because
that being the first scene.
Yeah, because so what it does, it's like a sort of like palette presenter for this movie.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure if I would want it as my first scene. But at the same time, once again, like it sets you up for what essentially the movie is going to be.
Sure, I think that this is one of those scenes where. And I think there's a lot in this movie, and I think a lot of thrillers especially are obsessed with doing this. If it is a puzzle-type movie where you are intended to solve it, like figure out what is happening by the end of the movie, the directors are so obsessed with like giving you the answers in like tiny little ways beforehand. And a lot of it doesn't have to do with the first watch. Like, whenever you're watching it the first time, it's not intended to tell you what's happening, really. Yeah. It's more like a second or third watch thing.
Yeah. The most important thing, definitely the first watch, I think, is Chris's experience in this home.
So I think that the first time you are meant to kind of absorb it, go, huh, okay, and then move on and not forget and not remember it. And you are supposed to the second time notice it in heavy.
Yeah.
And be like, whoa, oh, okay. Was this
the movie is, but the movie is purposefully like giving you a piece for like later on.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think the same goes for there's another scene that really stuck out to me. I remember the second time I watched it, and I like was freaking out because I didn't even notice it the first time.
Yeah.
And it's like the basically auctioning scene where there's silence.
The bingo.
And
the silent
bingo.
auction.
And I remember the first time I watched that, I was like, what is happening right now? And I didn't really even come back to it. Like, after the fact, after the movie, I didn't really even piece the puzzle together. I remember I was like a freshman in college. But I remember the second time.
Listen, when I watched it the first time, I'm like, oh, they're buying him. They're bidding on him.
I did not get it the first time.
Wow.
And then the second time, I was like, oh my God. And I could not.
Yeah.
I could not stop freaking out because that was such a big part.
But I think it goes to show in the movie that, like, okay, so like even though I don't know how you weren't able to figure it out, but even though you weren't able to figure it out the first time, it didn't matter terribly much because once again, that wasn't necessarily the most important part. The most important part is what Chris is going through.
Yeah.
You know, and I really appreciate this movie for never, diverting from that. And it's always the most interesting part. It's Chris's experience.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break and more Get Out.
Welcome back. We left off talking about some of the more shocking images of Get Out, as well as some things that we particularly...
we were talking about the bingo scene. That's what we were talking about last time.
Yeah.
You're trying to filibuster a little bit, but we should probably start a new topic. This
is what we're going to talk. Okay,
topic du jour.
Danny, let me do this. This is what we're going to talk about. Okay.
Take too long.
This is what we're going to talk about. Redbone by Childish Gambino.
Okay, what about that song? It's a song that's used in the very beginning of this film.
Yes.
It's the sort of, I think it's actually the first song. If
it
not
is.
the first song, excuse me, it's the second song technically, but
right.
whatever. It is used in the opening credits. I should have said in the first place. Anyway, so Redbone by Childish Gambino. I just hit the wall. Is that a fine?
I don't think so. It'd be the same as, well, I don't know. That's really the only thing that you could hit right here.
My elbow.
Anyways, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
My elbow.
I'm letting it slide. So, I think that the thing that really struck me this time about hearing Redbone for the first time in this movie is that I was just like, man, I forgot that like this is kind of where this song started. Like I didn't really hear Redbone before this movie, and this movie like was one of the first things that that launched Redbone, and it's funny thinking about the fact that
though.
I mean,
hold on. Like Childish Gambino was still. Like, he was a popular artist during
absolutely.
that time.
I think song.
That album was still going to be ridiculously popular, and I think that song was still going to be ridiculously popular.
But isn't it weird thinking about how unbelievably popular that song is still nowadays?
But like,
despite the fact that it was like one of its first big splashes was this movie.
For this song?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not something I think about. And honestly, I never attributed this song to this movie anyways. I never made that, sort of like connection. I didn't even remember this song was in this movie. I just
Really?
Yeah, no, I really don't.
Oh,
it's just using the opening credits.
Interesting.
It felt pretty, I mean, I wouldn't say insignificant, but it just felt like a part of the movie, right?
Sure.
I think of that album, and that album was really, really popular when it came out. Like, I think you're giving the movie and that song a lot of credit for the conjunction of one another, and I don't think, even though I'm sure the movie helped, I think you're giving too much credit, is what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. I think that...
Why are you bringing this up?
Huh?
Why are you bringing this up? You just find it curious?
Yeah, because like that was just one of the things, like the biggest things that I noticed is I was like, oh my God, I forgot this song was like this was one of the first places that I heard this song, and now I've heard it like hundreds of times at this point, and this is like a crazy popular song.
But okay, so maybe I will give you perhaps that like this song became more popular, on the front end because of this movie. Sure. But I think the staying power that this song has had is because of the song and because of the album and because of the artist, and not because of Get Out.
But also it reminded me of this. Around the same time that the movie came out, I started thinking to myself, like, okay, what are pieces that I can think of that are really, really spectacular and really, truly groundbreaking, and maybe I would give the word masterpiece.
Pieces?
Masterpieces that are around that time period, right? And I think that
like what you were having that experience a lot in like 2016, 2017, 2018. Were there just a lot of films during that time?
I would say that there was this kind of like liminal space in between like 2010, which there were like a lot of Oscar movies around 2010 that were really, really good, that you could potentially call masterpieces. Like,
I can't remember any movie from 2010.
The Social Network was at the Oscars in 2010, which if you haven't watched it recently,
there are good movies every year.
Scott Pilgrim, but I think that Scott, are you kidding me?
I mean,
I'm sorry, Scott Pilgrim was
Scott
groundbreaking,
Pilgrim,
but Scott Pilgrim was 100% groundbreaking. It changed editing.
Stylistically.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
and like stylistically done well in terms of like comic book, actually like art style, like translating page to screen, more so than like the first Hulk movie directed by oh God, what's his name? It's starring Eric Bana. I can't remember. I'm doing a deep cut.
Oh, go ahead.
You gotta give me a moment.
That's
because
very
this
niche,
movie is
though.
actually it's directed by Ang Lee. The first Hulk movie is directed by Ang Lee. Ang Lee, he directed Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Life of Pi.
What?
And he would use these like comic book, you know how like those panels, right?
Yeah.
And so he used that a lot throughout this movie, and it just didn't really work well. But Scott Pilgrim was an exception to that rule with the kicks and the pows.
Oh,
why
that's
are we
so sick.
okay? But like, listen, I'm trying to say there are masterpieces every year.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that they're
almost every year.
Sure, maybe. I think that there are pieces that are given incredible detail and attention. But I'm talking about like revolutionary pieces. I'm talking about pieces that change the game. I'm talking about pieces that give us something new, that change the way that we see things, or that are specifically effective in terms of like the artistic elements, the convincing the audience, the spreading a message, the changing the way that we see the world.
Yeah.
And in my mind, there are really only 3 pieces that are at the level of Get Out.
Okay.
And
ever?
No, from like that, it like in the 2010s.
In the past 10 years.
In the 2010s, yeah. No, well, 2019 I think had a lot. One sec. I'm just saying this was a thing that I had at the time. I was like, I remember seeing it and starting thinking back, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like in the 2010s, 2010 to like 2018.
Yeah, you're splitting hairs.
Get Out.
Yeah.
This Is America.
The music video that Childish Gambino
did. This Is America. Yes.
Did. Yes, it was his song. Thank you for
Okay, fine. Then I'll be as easy as possible with the next one.
Okay.
And then the next one was Kendrick Lamar's Damn.
Dude, I'm sorry. I think you're an insane prisoner of the moment.
Really?
Yeah.
I was an insane prisoner of the moment.
I would.
Because I think since then, I think
definitely not Kendrick Lamar's Damn.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That that was like, okay, that was, I don't even think Kendrick Lamar's best reviewed album that he's made. Out of all of them. And out of all of them, it's my least favorite album. I think Section 80 is better. I think Good Kid, Mad City is better. I think To Pimp a Butterfly is better than Damn.
I think I might agree with you. I'm saying...
I will not allow you to have Damn.
You're mishearing me. I'm not saying these are my favorites by any means.
But
saying
the masterpieces that are revolutionary. You said revolutionary.
Absolutely. They are, and
I refuse to believe that Damn is revolutionary.
Yes, I think that they changed a lot of things about the way that people in the world see those art forms. 100%.
Get Out, I will give you, because I think we're starting to kind of feel that, right? But it's still mostly Jordan Peele who is in that space, right?
Yeah.
That we're taking a look at more socio-political, racial elements in these movies as opposed to just being like horror movies. Because like for the longest time, for many years, horror films, the most popular ones were really only like the gory ones. Saw is a really good example that had a lot of commercial success. Final Destination as well, including the Friday the 13th,
the Paranormal Activity movies,
Paranormal Activity, right? Like the only horror movies that, from my understanding, as of in the past like 10, 15 years that have been of note is probably, I remember Insidious was very, very popular.
Yeah.
And Hereditary and Midsommar got a lot of traction, but I never saw those movies, so I don't know what kind of horror movies that they are. But in terms of like racial, socio-political commentary and examination done through a horror film, there's not much quite like Get Out. I will give you that. This Is America, I'm not insanely sure, because even though it was ludicrously impressive, you're calling it revolutionary, and I'm not sure where else it has sort of trickled out into, especially since music really, like music for a lot of the time has always been used as a sort of commentary platform, right? Especially in hip hop, especially in rap. That has been the case for decades and decades and decades. So I think
but how do you in hip hop and in rap music, in the history of it, whenever an artist wants to make a message, how do they go about making that message? By saying it.
Yeah, it's usually through the lyricism in their songs. So you're saying, like, as a music video? Is that what you're specifically saying about This Is America?
I think that This Is America, the totality of what Childish Gambino is going for is only fully understood and fully fleshed out in the music video.
Sure, but I think you're still giving it too much credit by calling it revolutionary.
Okay.
Because but like using the fact that it's amazing, yes, I'm gonna give you always any day of the week that it's amazing for sure. Calling it revolutionary, I think, is a step too far, because I don't see where that has trickled out into like that specifically.
Okay.
Right?
Like who else has taken that change and like used it into?
And we're talking like,
also
talking mostly like, because the song is still powerful in and of itself, even when you're just listening to it. But it's the music video that enhances it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I will say, still, even at this point, I don't think anybody has used a music video to like that much effectiveness as This Is America.
Right.
But I
think the reason the music video is way more successful and more fully fleshed out than the song is because because he's saying This Is America, but he doesn't. If you're only listening to it, then you're not really fully understanding what he means by This Is America. But he's showing you This Is America.
Okay, sure, and it's a song that needs a music video. Sure, and Damn, I'm absolutely going to give you nothing for it. Absolutely not. But we've spent a lot of time talking about
Knock It Out.
Yes,
got it.
And so let's bring it back. Let's reel it back in.
I think that it is. What I'm trying to get back to, though, is that I think that there were very few things around that time that grabbed audiences and forced them to come to the theaters in the way that did.
Yeah.
And especially different crowds of people. Because, I mean, that was like around Avengers time.
That wasn't like a comic book
I was about
movie.
to say, that was around Avengers time and everything, and that was bringing like a specific type of person, sure.
Yeah.
But those weren't really making messages, or those weren't really viewed as like cinema. You know what I mean? Those were a fun time. That was like that was like going to an amusement park. You know what I mean?
Yes, I mean, there's still cinema, but not in the traditional sense of like art.
Yeah.
Art.
I think it's still be good. They can still move you, but in the same way
Yeah.
that, like, you know, you're overwhelmed as a child whenever you're seeing, like,
a roller coaster.
Yeah, or like
and
it's someone dressed up as Woody at Disney World, whatever.
Wild.
You know what I mean, though. But but anyways, Danny, what's something about this movie, or maybe what was your first experience watching it versus this time? Like how did it change for you? As well as potentially something that you might you feel like you might be stealing from this.
Okay, so this is the biggest thing that I noticed on the second watch. So like on a first watch, I would give the gold medal to Daniel Kaluuya, right? And he does, I think, a really, really good job and is a wonderful sort of apparatus / bridge to like what is going on throughout the movie and our experience as an audience watching it, right?
Yeah.
Second time around, I would give the gold medal to at very least, the character of Rose, who is played by Allison Williams.
100%.
Right?
Yep.
Because what happens in the second time around is that you're noticing so much more the action that she is throwing, the tactics that she is using against or at other characters that are around her, right?
Yeah.
And so like there are some things that you put together, right? Like one example is the fact of she didn't want Chris to give his ID to the policeman so she doesn't leave a paper trail. That's a pretty common example that people use, but one of my favorites to see, and it's honestly one of my favorite scenes in the movie because of how bleeped up it is, but what it does to the characters that are Chris and Rose, right? Where it's the party scene and all these older white people are asking questions about Chris and his body and stuff like that. Chris is immensely uncomfortable, and you think that Rose, Allison Williams' character, is like throwing the action of stop making him uncomfortable, and what's actually happening is you can't blow our cover now.
Mm-hmm.
You are showing way too much because you are way too excited.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like, of course, maybe you're able to put together in the movie of like maybe Rose is up to something, right? That she is involved in this in some capacity beforehand, right? Before Chris finds all the old pictures of the people that she has essentially abducted. Like maybe Rose is part of this. And so what makes this movie actually really fascinating on the second watch is clocking every time that she is deliberately doing something in order to keep this like con up.
Right.
Which is super exciting. And like, exciting as like someone who consumes and loves art, you know, just, but like to watch a character do that, obviously it's sickening as hell. And every time she turns into Roro, as they call in the trivia, at least that I've read, but every time she turns into Roro, it's just like, ugh, you monster. Like, and she really is the most if not like the most monstrous person in this movie and the most sickening individual in this movie. But I think it's a testament to like the dynamic of her putting on this act and then her actually doing, you know, what she needs to do. And so then when that line is blurred is some of my favorite moments in this movie by Allison Williams herself.
I think I especially agree with you on you saying that it is the character of Rose played by Allison Williams, because I agree we should absolutely give credit to Allison Williams, and she is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think she does a great job.
And I want to, you know, make sure it's very clear that no one else should have been playing that part. But I think it was Jordan Peele's work on the character of Rose.
Yes, I think it was the biggest proponent. The biggest proponent was the writing and the direction of Rose.
100%. Absolutely.
And I once again, I still think Allison Williams did a good job, but this is just one of those cases where it's just like, you are not the lead front runner as to why this character is so good in this film.
Right.
Which is totally okay.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, at least that's what I think.
She still great, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, there were just so many moments that if anyone did them, they would be different and maybe not as good because Allison Williams is great, but that they would still serve their purpose.
I love how me more so, but we're such insane actor apologists.
We're trying to make sure that, she gets her credit.
We're trying to like kitty litter, you know what I'm saying?
Her credit.
We're just trying to like shovel it. And just like, okay, but listen, this is what we think, but like we're not trying to say anything, you know, and then it's funny whenever we don't like something.
Don't want to take it away from Allison Williams, but the credit there definitely goes to Jordan Peele.
Yeah. I think the construction of the character is really, really well done. And like, you need the director to essentially remind the actor you can't show too much. But this is the moment when you can.
And
it takes a very fine-tooth comb to parts.
On that topic, though, the what you just said, I think that's a whole other piece of this movie that needs to be discussed, which is it's not even just watching the movie that taught me so much. It is listening to Jordan Peele lectures or Jordan Peele interviews after the movie, him talking about it, not just the writing of it, but especially his direction. That was mind-boggling and so funny because he's a comedian. He's a very cool person, but just, I mean, the ways that they would come up with this stuff was so clever. It makes me go, I wish that I would have thought of that. For instance, the he was talking about how they were trying to get images for, like, cinematography for Rose's character and how to make her character more clear just by images. And they were talking about they would have this exercise where they would say, okay, Rose is the type of person who blank, and they would think of a bunch of funny things, but then they ended up with a bunch of images that were really cool. Like, for instance,
super specific image.
Yeah, super, like the type of stuff that sticks with you. Like we're talking about with Jordan Peele, he makes these things that you can't forget. Like Rose is the type of person who separates the colors in her cereal.
Yeah,
like that.
And she has a glass of milk with her cereal, and she eats the cereal one by one. And it's very, very specific. And then it's within that same exact shot where she is sitting on her bed, and she has this like sterile clothing on now, and she has her hair in a ponytail now.
Yeah.
That she also put the pictures back up of her past quote unquote relationships of like the people that she has actively been a part of, abducting.
Yeah.
She puts those pictures on the wall right behind her, and they're sort of like trophies essentially. And so like there's so much about that character in that one shot, but it's still that very, very clear image of like a close-up of the cereal in a bowl by itself with a glass of milk right next to it, and she's not even with a spoon and just eating it one by one. And like I'm a little bit throwing rocks from a glass house because I do admit I don't eat my cereal with milk. And yeah, Mac, your eyes have just widened.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I don't eat my cereal with milk. However, I don't eat it one by one with a glass of milk. And I don't abduct individuals. I don't abduct individuals, Mac. I need you to know that.
I believe you. You don't eat it dry?
Yeah, no, I do eat it dry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dry?
Yeah. These are my confessions.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, but
I'll grant it to you. Yeah, sure.
But there was like another image that I read as well but to describe Rose, like the loving sort of, facade that she puts up, Rose is the kind of person where you meet her at a summer camp and you have the biggest crush on her. And it's like that. Yeah, that's exactly her. Just charismatic, wonderful, full of life. And like, so you can see why any sort of individual would just play right into her hands.
Right.
It's really well executed.
That is
character.
You're right. That's a very specific description.
And it's probably the character in the movie that's most devoted to the entire bleeped up operation that's going on, right? How long she maintains her character, and is definitely probably the most integral part because she's the one that makes, whichever host or guest rather, feel uncomfortable or feel comfortable by their being there, right? While they're being uncomfortable by everything else around them. But she is like a constant part of making sure that the lid stays on top of the pot while everything is bubbling underneath. So I think it really says a lot about the execution of that character. There's not really much else that I can segue into from there. I mean, truth be told, I didn't have like a lot of notes. Like if you're viewing this right now, if you're looking at the video feed, there is only like half a page of notes that I have because there's not much crazy stuff to be said, but there's a lot more stuff, I guess, to be taken away. And I think this movie is better in a sort of like sort of discussion format, perhaps, as opposed to like an analytical study by yourself point of view. That I think this is a movie that is to be discussed and acknowledged with and by other people.
Yeah.
I think it's what makes this movie partially special, because it does feel like a movie in terms of the community aspect of such, of like, we got to watch this movie together and we got to be impacted by this movie together. And we have to learn from this movie together, of like, realizing, because once again, we are still from the privileged aspect of, we don't have to go through any sort of struggle of any sort of kind faced by any Black individual. But this movie does a really, really good job of, once again, having Chris be that bridge of shit. So like, a really sour experience, right? Of course, minus the neurosurgeon, all that humbo jumbo. That experience of just comments after comments after comments of being really uncomfortable and really racist, but not outwardly racist, but still very much so racist.
Yeah.
Like, this movie does a really good job of painting all of that. So then when you watch it, you do still think to yourself, like, I got to be better, and I got to pay more attention to like what's going on around me, at the very least.
Right. In your...
Did you like that filibuster?
I did. I thought it was pretty good. In your mind, Danny, where does this stand in terms of film history? And do you think that it deserves the title of masterpiece?
What I appreciate this movie being really, really tight as well. A tight run ship. It's only an hour 44 minutes. It's a short film, and so it doesn't waste any time. I think it's really, really well done. Masterpiece. If it's not a masterpiece, it's very close to it.
Yeah.
I don't think we felt enough of the waves of this movie quite yet, but I think this movie is going to do a lot, and I think people, as kids and teenagers and young adults are growing up as filmmakers, I think they're going to look back at this movie in the horror genre and realizing that people can do so much more in that genre, right? Because when you think of horror, you think of jump scares, and there are like 2 or 3 in this movie, and there are like very unsettling moments, and for a large part of it, I would say it's more of a thriller than it is like a traditional thriller than it is a traditional horror movie, right? But with that being said, I think people will still look back on and at this movie as a source of great inspiration, which you cannot say for a lot of films in general. You may look at like some like directors and stuff in general, but this is like a singular movie that people will do that for.
Do you think that in the same way that Alfred Hitchcock was kind of one of the masters of horror for a while, or thrillers, and then that baton was passed to the likes of Stephen King or then Stanley Kubrick, do you think that Jordan Peele is the current in our current zeitgeist the master of horrors / thrillers?
I don't even think this is difficult to say, but I think it's safe to say that he's one of the best ones out there right now. I would say it's probably between him and I believe his name is Ari Aster, probably, who directed Hereditary and Midsommar. Which is like, but those are the most popular ones in the last 5 years. But once again, I haven't seen Hereditary and Midsommar, but from my understanding, those also kind of flip it on the head a little bit, right? In terms of the execution and not really horror in the most traditional of senses. So it has the audience realize, and the consumer and the artistic experience, all of that realize there's so much more to the genre, right? Yes. There's so much story actually that can be done with this. It doesn't have to be super duper campy, super duper gory, super duper silly. We don't have to have Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger face off against one another. That's just like a bad sign.
Another one is
is this a 2-minute warning?
Okay. It is a 2-minute warning. Okay. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning though is the fact that like Sixth Sense, for instance, right?
Yeah.
A fantastic movie.
Haley Joel Osment.
Who directed Sixth Sense?
It was M. Night Shyamalan, I believe.
It really was, actually?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Why did you ask me if you didn't know the answer?
Because I was trying to make a point.
What kind of point were you trying to make?
I was trying to make a point that I think that Ari Aster is probably not going to be on the same level as Jordan Peele overall in terms of film history, because although we know Midsommar and Hereditary, we don't know Ari Aster, but we know Jordan Peele in the same way that, like, every name that I just named, Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, Stephen King, we know those names.
And that may change in the future in terms of Ari Aster, but like let's also recognize, I mean, from what we know, this is Jordan Peele's first foray into film as a director and as a writer. And both, right? This is his vehicle.
Yeah.
And so it was such a jumping off point
Yeah.
for him. And so immediately it's like, oh, and it was also, we already knew him, right? We already knew him from Mad TV and Key and Peele.
Right.
Right? It was like, oh, that Jordan Peele?
Right.
He made this movie?
Right.
I have to watch out for him now.
Yeah. And I would give it the label of masterpiece. And like you said, if it's not in someone's eyes, it should be pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with the intent or the messages of the movie or not, I think that you can look at this movie just objectively as a piece of film or a piece of media and definitely study and take this class. Danny, what are we viewing next week?
Firstly, I just want to say that it is immaculately well done, this film. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Mac was lobbying for a movie prior to our recording, and it's understandable because I want to see this movie too. It's another movie in theaters, again, Mac, but this movie has caught my eye. The trailer looks really good. I heard very good things, and we both, agreed, okay, we should watch it. Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yes! Finally. Yes, yes, yes.